A drug addict named James runs out of a farmhouse and flees into the woods. A woman tries to follow him, screaming desperately, but she is shot in the back with a shotgun by a man named Vincent and his son Simon, and then they burn her alive. And so it begins. Welcome to Random Recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap the movie. Sheriff Daniel Carter finds James crawling out of the woods and onto the road while on patrol. Seeing that he is injured, Daniel rushes him to the local hospital, which has been largely abandoned after a recent fire. The nurse Allison Fraser works there and helps with James. Most of the hospital is still unusable because of the fire, so a minimal staff is on duty, consisting of Dr. Richard Powell, nurses Allison and Beverly, and the intern Kim. Alongside them are a few patients: the pregnant teenager Maggie, her grandfather Ben, and a patient named Cliff. The doctor manages to calm James, who is traumatized. Allison Fraser is Daniel's wife, but the two have been distant since the recent death of their unborn child. Daniel stays at the hospital, waiting for James to wake up so he can investigate him. While walking down the hallways, Daniel notices Beverly murdering Cliff and that she has ripped the skin off her face. Daniel tries to reason with her and calm her down, but Beverly attacks him, so Daniel shoots her. The nurses and doctor realize what is happening. Daniel starts to feel strange, nauseous, and suddenly begins to have visions of a sinister and unreal place, something from another world. Allison and the doctor find him unconscious, wake him up, and try to calm him. Meanwhile, State Trooper Mitchell arrives at the hospital to pick up James after discovering a bloody scene at the farmhouse. Mitchell takes Daniel's weapon because of what he did. He goes to report the situation to the police station but realizes the phone isn't working, so he steps outside to use the radio in his car. As he tries to communicate, a figure in a white robe and a hood with a black triangle for a face appears. Daniel tries to speak to him, but the figure just stands there. Suddenly, Daniel hears a strange noise, and the lights go out. At that moment, the figure in the white robe stabs him. When Daniel manages to push him off, he realizes there are more of them. He runs back to the hospital. The lights are back on, and Beverly is transforming into something strange. The doctor and nurses help Daniel to stop him from bleeding out. Daniel has more visions until he wakes up when they manage to stop the hemorrhage. The people in the white robes surround the hospital, but none of them enter. They just stand there watching. James wakes up. When Mitchell and Daniel go to find him, they discover that Beverly has turned into a tentacled creature. They rescue James and lock the creature in a room. Daniel grabs an axe. Vincent and his son arrive, demanding James. James takes Maggie hostage. Daniel tries to calm everyone down. The doctor tries to reason with James to release Maggie, but James attacks him. Maggie's grandfather saves her, and they leave James handcuffed on the floor. At that moment, the creature bursts out of the room and grabs Mitchell. Daniel tries to save him, but the creature devours him. Vincent and his son help Daniel kill the creature, which was also trying to possess Mitchell. Vincent tells Daniel he's there to get James because he believes James is part of the cult outside. Distrusting Daniel, he wants to kill him. Apparently, his son was attacked the last time they trusted someone, which left him mute. Daniel assures them they don't know what's going on. To make sure the creature doesn't wake up, they burn it and remove it from the hospital. Everyone gathers together, though tensions run high. Allison tells Daniel that Maggie's baby is at risk, so she needs to get supplies in case a C-section is necessary. Daniel asks Vincent for help retrieving his shotgun from the car outside. Vincent refuses but agrees when Daniel convinces him on the condition that he gives the gun to Vincent. When they step outside, they realize the patrol car is farther from the hospital. Allison doesn't wait for Daniel and goes alone to get the supplies. Meanwhile, Daniel and Simon search for the shotgun and ammunition while Vincent keeps watch. As Allison searches for the supplies, we realize the doctor is alive, and he kidnaps her. The people in the white robes arrive and attack Simon. Daniel helps him and they make it back to the hospital. They realize that the cultists haven't surrounded them to trap them, but to ensure they stay inside the hospital. Realizing Allison went for the supplies alone, Daniel and Vincent go to find her, while Simon stays behind to get help for his wound. Along the way, they grab Mitchell's gun. The two hear a phone ringing, and when Daniel answers, a man mentions the visions Daniel had when he was unconscious, saying he can show him more. From the voice, Daniel realizes it's Dr. Richard. Vincent finds photos and files that hint that Richard is the leader of the cult keeping them in the hospital and that he was responsible for Beverly turning into a creature. Daniel takes the supplies to the intern, gives Mitchell's gun to Ben, and asks them to hold out while he looks for Allison. In the photos they found, James appears, so they wake him up to question him about what's happening, torturing him to get him to talk. James only knows that the doctor is behind everything, but he doesn't understand why he's still alive or what he really is. He explains that he was lured, because he's a drug addict looking for drugs, to a ceremony where a cult led by Richard was making sacrifices, killing people, and forcing James and others to watch. James says this has nothing to do with demonic things or satanic worship. Also, Richard has the ability to transform people, as they saw with Beverly. The three force James to accompany them to find Allison. So, the four head to the basement with Kim guiding them. But it seems they find stairs Kim didn't know about. Terrified, they send James down first. Meanwhile, Allison wakes up on an operating table, confused by Richard's resurrection. He tells her he lost his daughter Sarah, which led him to seek a solution to defy death. As the group descends the stairs, they find an area where the cultists performed their ceremonies.
This was all over the house we cleaned out.
There they find a door with the triangular symbol. Seeing it, Daniel has more visions, some of Allison pregnant. Determined to find his wife, Daniel enters. Meanwhile, Richard cuts his face and shows Allison that something is growing inside her. Daniel, Vincent, Simon, and James find bodies that Richard experimented on. Vincent begins having visions,
He's in his head! He's in his head!
as if they've been possessed. The corpses start rising and attacking the group. Maggie begins having convulsions, and despite being inexperienced, Kim has no choice but to perform a C-section. Vincent leaves the group behind. James attacks Daniel, but a creature grabs and kills him. Meanwhile, Ben asks Kim to help Maggie while he holds off the cultists who just entered. At that moment, Maggie slits her grandfather's throat, smiling. She reveals that not only is she a cultist, but she's also carrying Dr. Richard's baby.
Dr. Powell is a great man. I'm lucky to carry his child.
The cultists appear, and Maggie leaves with them. Kim tries to escape, but they are everywhere. Simon runs in search of his father and suddenly enters a vision where we see his house, a family photo, and pictures of his mother and sister. Vincent, as if possessed and in a trance, blames his son for the death of the two and attacks him. Simon burns him with a flare to wake him. When he wakes up, they manage to escape the vision. Kim is hiding, trying to locate Daniel, but he no longer has the radio. Daniel hears Allison's voice, finds her, and realizes she's pregnant. Hearing Richard's voice, he realizes Allison has turned into a creature with tentacles extending from inside her body, covering the entire room. Daniel asks Richard what he did to his wife, and he responds,
I've given her what she wanted. She's the mother.
Daniel has no choice but to kill his wife. Suddenly, Daniel is transported to a morgue with a black triangle with glowing edges engraved on the wall. Richard tells Daniel that there are ancient beings older than time who have blessed him with the power to defy death. The cultists and Maggie appear, and she stabs Daniel. Richard asks Daniel to join them. He appears skinless in front of the triangle, as Maggie happily kneels before him. For the ritual that will bring his daughter back to life, Richard promises his followers transformation and tells Daniel that he will experience the same as him. But first, he must die for him.
Like your father and son before you.
Richard recites an incantation in front of the triangle, which transforms into a gateway to an abyssal plane, glowing completely. Richard approaches Maggie and says,
Place my daughter into this vessel.
Meanwhile, Maggie's now terrified torso explodes, giving birth to a reborn Sarah, who is not human but another deformed supernatural monster. The creature kills a couple of disciples, and then Vincent and Simon arrive to face the beast, which manages to wrap its tentacles around Vincent and fatally wound him. But Vincent douses himself in isopropyl alcohol, forcing Simon to set them both on fire with a flare. Simon escapes the creature. Daniel strikes Richard with the axe, but it has no effect. Richard tells Daniel he can give him Allison if he joins him. Daniel, near death, seems ready to accept, but it's just a trick to throw himself and Richard into the triangle's abyss. This causes the space beneath the hospital to start shaking and collapsing. Simon barely escapes the creature by running down a hallway that transports him back to the hospital. There, he finds Ben dead and thinks he's the only survivor. But upon hearing a noise, he realizes that Kim is also alive.
Is it over? Is it over?
And you may wonder what was on the other side of the triangle. On the other side, we find a place just like the visions Daniel had, a world beyond earthly logic, menacing and dark. There, Daniel and Allison are alive, holding hands, as they gaze at what seems to be the symbol represented by the triangle. A huge pyramid made of darkness floating above them. Perhaps this is the pyramid the people in the white robes worshipped. And that's how the movie ends.